The following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
I'm Paula, and I'm Heather's mother.
I'm Heather, I'm Paula's daughter.
And let us tell you why we decided to go to rehab together.
Heather, you and I were talking earlier, and before that I was speaking with Paula, your mother, and I just want to touch on, for people out there who are in families who have multiple people in the family who use, I like to talk about how that affects the different members of the family. So how did growing up, being a young girl, your mother wasn't doing drugs your whole life, is that right?
Correct.
And how old were you when you noticed that your mother was doing drugs?
I was about 23.
Okay, so you, up until 23 years old, you never saw any sort of drug usage in the house?
No, my mom's boyfriend used to smoke weed, but that was the only kind of drug I used to see. And I didn't really, we had to go outside whenever he smoked weed, so when we used to hear go outside and play in the backyard, we knew what that meant, you know. We had to go outside and play, and the grown-ups stayed inside. My mom, she didn't smoke weed, but he did, and his friends would come over and they would smoke weed.
And at what point did you notice that your mom was doing drugs and not just around some weed?
I was probably about 23.
And then what did you notice changed in your mother?
She was working with this lady, and I noticed that my mom was staying out late. And I'd stay up late waiting for my mom to come home. And when she would come driving up the driveway, I'd run out there, where have you been? Like I was the kid, you know. At the time I wasn't doing any kind of drug, you know.
And so you started to notice she was coming home late and she was working somewhere, and then the schedule started changing up. It wasn't as consistent.
Yeah, she was just coming home later, like way later.
And at what point did you find out she was doing drugs?
Probably not long after that, I found out.
How did it affect you?
It hurt. Me and her would fight, and it felt like I lost my friend, you know, like I lost my best friend.
So Paula, you start coming home late from work. You had just started doing drugs for the first time in your life. You're in your 40s at that point. How did you notice that the relationships with your children started to change?
I think they weren't respecting me as much. I mean, they wouldn't listen to me. They could tell just by my I guess my actions, you know, my face expressions, you know. I mean, it's like it's not that I didn't care about my kids. It's just that I slacked off on being a mom.
And at what point did you feel like it was okay for you to leave, and you left and you went out of state, right?
Yes, but that was a while after, you know, a couple of years went by, and Heather was already, you know, they done left and, you know, moved out of the house, and I just followed a guide to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I stayed missing in action for about a year. And I was afraid to call my family because I was wanting to come home, but I was afraid of I told you so, which that wasn't the case at all. You know, they were all happy that I called and wanted to come home. And as a matter of fact, when I did get off that bus, my whole family was there at the bus station, lined up against the wall outside the bus station, waiting for me to get off the bus.
I was the first one she seen. I was ready. I was up running to my mom and hugged her, and I was so happy. I got my best friend back. Got my mom back.
And so how did your guys' relationship change when you came back?
It took a lot of work, but gradually, you know, over the years, it got better, but it took a lot of work. I feel like that my drug use was a gateway for her to think it was okay for her to do drugs, and that bothers me a lot, you know, because I felt like they seen Mama do it, and Mama was always perfect in their eyes, you know.
At what point did you notice Heather was using drugs as well?
Heather was always my good kid, you know. Growing up, she read the Bible all the time, you know. She was always praying. She'd be no other kids around at the school cafeteria, you know, and I'd go check in on the kids, and Heather sat middle of the cafeteria with her hands just up praying, not carrying anybody around, watching her do it. She would read books all the time. And Heather met a guy, her kid's father, and he's the one that got her on drugs, on pills and stuff like that. I think started it. Man got into the heavier drug.
In hindsight, is there anything you can think of that you could have done to prevent her from maybe getting involved with somebody like she ended up getting involved with, introducing her to drugs?
Oh, I tried. Believe me, I was on Mama Bear. I ran her down and him down, but it didn't do any good. She had a mindset, set. She was already an adult and she wanted to run with her baby's daddy. So there wasn't nothing I could say or do would change her mind. I tried.
And what was it like watching Heather progress with her drug usage from the initial to sort of where we ended up before you guys came into rehab?
It hurt. I mean, it's my baby, and I feel like I created it. I feel like the baby's daddy created it, but she followed in my footsteps. That's what I feel like.
And what do you think, Heather?
I made my own choices. My mom had nothing to do with it. And my mom would tell me, she would call. She was so scared, of where I was at nighttime. And they would look for me because I was with the guy that would let me have no contact with my mom. He said they're trashy, that anybody in my family was trashy, that I could have no contact with them. And my mom and my grandma, they found the numbers where I was at and called, and his dad answered the phone, and he let me talk to my mom and my grandma. And then Sean found out. He's like, "You talk to them? You let her talk to them? They're trashy." He's no, her grandma and her mom deserved to talk to her. And he let me talk to my mom and my grandma.
And he ended up doing drugs, same kind of drug that I was doing, down the line, so.
He was hiding it from me. I didn't know until I found the straw beside the bed. He was doing coke. And I would find, residue. And he said, that's for trashy people. But beside the bed, I found his straw and I found residue of him doing it. Then I found Xanax in his pocket once. And that was my choice back then. I was like, man, I'm going to take these. I had them in my hands. You better not put them back. Those are my mom's. So if they're your mom's, why do you got them?
So as things progress and now Paula's home, she's sober, she's been doing good for a while. At what point then, when you relapse, Paula, what was your relationship like with Heather during that relapse?
It was kind of like we grew apart, but that's because of me doing, me relapsing, not wanting my family to see me like that, and that's why I would stay away. So, we would always get back together, men are problems, but then something else would happen, another tragedy, and then I would go to pills or something else,
And Heather, were you around when your mom got in the accident that caused her to start using the pills?
I don't think I was around. I really have, since I've been 17, I've been out, of the house. I go back and stay for a couple months or a year, and then I move out again. And I remember looking in the dictionary, like the part where it says, who died. And when my mom was out in Minneapolis, I didn't know where my mom was at, but I knew. I just looked in the newspaper. Yes, every day I would, and see if my mom's name was in there, because I didn't know she was alive or she was dead. I would hold my breath the whole time, then hoping I didn't see my mom's name.
I put my family through a lot. That's a regret, I'll always have. I can't change it. I can't. All I can do is just stay sober. That's the only way I can change it. I can't make up for what I've done in the past.
And ultimately, that's what led you guys to decide to come to rehab, is your willingness to want to be that rock for your family. And then Heather, you wanting to be able to do the same for your children as well. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
So what was it that made you guys decide that this was the time?
Well, Heather, I mean, I've been wanting to, through all my surgeries, I can't get off my pain pills now because I have another surgery coming up. But I hadn't had it in my head that once I got through with my last surgery, that was it. Well, Heather's been talking about a lot to get off her drugs, and she could never find the right rehab because, I mean, Heather's a smoker. You know what? No, you can't. She didn't want to go because she couldn't smoke. And when she found out that I found a place that I can go to,
You have your phone too, and I like that.
and I looked into it, then Heather wanted to go. Then that's whenever I called you guys and made all the arrangements, But Heather was willing the whole time.
And tell us about your experience here at White House for treatment versus anywhere else you guys have been for any sort of drug treatment.
Places I've been before, it's like a 10-day detox, I mean, 10 days, they kick you out, that was it, I mean, I could have went some other place, but I had my daughter I had to look after, and I didn't have anyone to care for. But this place here, I mean, it's more than just a 10-day detox, you detox, but also you're learning the steps and getting the tools that you need to go through life without drugs.
Do you feel like that's beneficial?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yes.
How many days sober are you guys right now?
16 days.
It's 16. I was 17, 16.
When's the last time you were this sober, Heather?
It's been a long, long time.
How are you starting to feel now, 16 days in?
Sometimes I get anxiety and I get cravings, but I just fight them back. And if I can save one girl from my story, then, it's worth it. If I can save just at least one girl, I want to save lots of girls or with lots of people, but that one girl, that's safe.
What would you say to that young girl who maybe has a mom who is using drugs or alcohol and she feels like she wants to make those decisions for herself and go down that path? What would you say to her?
I tell her mom's going through problems and just be there for her mom and don't give up on her mom, that her mom loves her. This is addiction. It's a strong thing to fight and to be by her mom's side and not to leave. And that's her mama, You can't leave your mama.
And what would you say, Paula, to mothers out there who may be struggling with their own drug usage and may have children who could potentially follow in their footsteps? What would you say to that woman?
I would say to stick with your children, to not give up on them, and quit for your children, quit for yourself. Quit for yourself for first, but also quit for your children. They need you. No matter how old they are, they're still your babies. I'm 56 years old. Heather's 40, but she's still my baby. I'm always going to be here for her.